My family came here today to mourn the daughter we lost. My mother said that right in front of me, in a wedding hall with 150 people. Most brides worry about rain on their wedding day. I watched my parents walk into my reception dressed head to toe in black, like they were showing up to a funeral. My name is Lena Harper. I'm a photographer, and I'm 30 years old. And this is the story of how my family tried to destroy my wedding in front of hundreds of people. Before I keep going, if you're listening and this hits close to home, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Tell me where you're watching from, and what time it is where you live. I'm always curious how far my story is traveling, and this is the story of how my family tried to destroy my wedding in front of hundreds of people. Now let me tell you what happened. To understand where this started, we have to go back 16 months. The day I wrote a check my father called the biggest mistake of my life. 16 months ago, I grew up in Willow Creek, Tennessee. A town so small that if you drive through it without paying attention, you could miss it. Population under 5,000. One intersection with a traffic light. One gas station. One small grocery store. And one church where everyone knows your business before you even get the chance to say it out loud. My father owned a local construction company. He always said family was the most important thing. But in reality, family, by his definition, only meant one person. My brother, Ryan Harper. Ryan was my father's pride. He studied business. My dad brought him into the company. He drove the brand new pickup truck my father bought for him. And me, I was the dreamer daughter. That's what my father called my work. I was a photographer. I shot weddings, family portraits, and sometimes small events around town. My father always said my job wasn't a real career. A camera can't feed you, he used to say. I heard it so many times I practically had it memorized, but I kept doing my work anyway. And then one day, I met Ethan Cole. Ethan was the first person in my life who made me feel like someone truly saw me. He was a software engineer, working remotely for a tech company in Austin. We met at a mutual friend's birthday party. He told me I had eyes that watched everything like I was telling a story through pictures. I thought it was the most beautiful thing anyone had ever said to me. We started dating. 6 months later, Ethan proposed. He proposed on a small path by the lake in the city park. No music, no audience. Just the two of us, and the wind moving across the water. I said yes immediately, but when I called my parents to tell them, their reaction wasn't what I thought it would be. My mother went quiet for a few seconds. Then she asked, "What does his family do?" Not, "Is he good to you?" Not, "Are you happy?" But, "What does his family do?" My father was even more blunt. "You're marrying some programmer who works from home," he said. "Are you sure he even has a real job?" I laughed it off. I thought time would change their minds. I was wrong. 3 months later, we started planning the wedding. Ethan and I wanted something simple, a small garden, about 100 guests, soft music. But my parents wanted a big wedding. A Harper family wedding, the kind that looked right for our name. They said they would help cover part of the cost. I believed them. That was my second mistake. My first mistake was thinking my family would support this marriage. My second mistake was not realizing my parents never actually wanted me to be happy. They just wanted me to obey. 6 months before the wedding, I started hearing rumors in town. That Ethan wasn't stable. That his job couldn't be trusted. That I was walking myself into trouble. I didn't understand where those rumors were coming from, until an old friend said something to me I will never forget. "Lena, your parents are telling people you're being played." I remember what it felt like to hear that. Like someone yanked the rug out from under you. I didn't want to believe it. But deep down, I knew it could be true. I just didn't know things were going to go so much further. So far that my wedding day would become one of the most chaotic nights Willow Creek had ever witnessed. I tried to convince myself it was just small-town gossip. That's how small towns are. One sentence misunderstood. One story exaggerated. Something small turns into something huge. But as the days passed, I realized it wasn't a misunderstanding. One early fall afternoon, I was photographing a couple's wedding shoot outside town when the bride asked me something that made me stop cold. "Lena, do you really trust that Ethan guy?" I looked at her. "What do you mean?" She hesitated for a few seconds, then spoke quietly. Your parents told my mom that he's using you. I smiled slightly. But it was the kind of smile you use when you don't know how you're supposed to react. I ended the shoot earlier than planned. On the drive home, I called my mother. She answered after a few rings. Hi, honey. Her voice was calm like it always was. Mom, I said, have you been telling people Ethan is using me? Silence on the line for a few seconds. Then my mother sighed. We're just worried about you. That was her familiar answer every time she did something that hurt me. Worried about you. By trashing your fiancé to the whole town. Lena, she said. Naive because you don't realize when someone is taking advantage of you. I didn't say anything else. I hung up. The car kept rolling down the narrow road back toward the center of town. Cornfields on both sides had started turning yellow. And I remember thinking one thing in that moment. If my parents truly believed Ethan was a bad person, why didn't they say it to me? Why did they tell everyone else first? That night, Ethan was cooking when I got home. Our small apartment was on the second floor of an old building near the town square. The smell of garlic and tomatoes filled the room. He turned when he saw me walk in. How was your day? I set my camera on the table. Do you have 5 minutes? He looked at me, then turned off the stove. What's going on? I told him everything. The rumors. The phone call with my mom. The questions people were asking. Ethan didn't speak while I talked. He just sat there and listened. When I finished, he asked one simple question. Do you believe them? I shook my head immediately. No, he nodded. That was something I always loved about Ethan. He never turned everything into a war. He only focused on what mattered most. I sat beside him. But I don't understand why they're doing this. Ethan went quiet for a few seconds, then said something I didn't fully pay attention to at the time. Maybe they're afraid of losing control. I frowned. What do you mean? He shrugged. Just a guess. Then he smiled. But I don't think we should let it ruin our plans. I smiled too. We kept eating dinner. We talked about the venue, the music, the guest list, but I didn't know that while we were planning the happiest day of our lives, my parents were planning too. And their plan wasn't to bless me. 3 months later, things started getting strange. One morning, I got a call from the bank. Miss Harper, we need to confirm a transaction. I didn't make any transaction. The woman on the line told me the amount. $20,000. I almost dropped my phone. I'm sorry, I said. How much? 20,000. I checked my account. The money was gone. The recipient was a construction company. The name made my heart sink. Harper Construction. My father's company. I called him immediately. Dad, you just took money out of my account. He didn't sound surprised at all. I needed something temporary. You took $20,000 without asking me. I raised you for 20 years. His voice turned cold. Don't act like I'm stealing from you. I stood still in the living room. Ethan was working at the desk by the window. He looked at me. I said into the phone, You need to put it back. My father laughed. Short and sharp. You're spending money on some unemployed programmer, Lena. I think I should worry about my family first. Then he hung up. I stood there for a few minutes, not speaking, not moving. Ethan came closer. What happened? I handed him the phone. He looked at the screen, looked at the amount, then looked at me. Is this the first time? I shook my head. But it's the first time they've done it without warning me. Ethan sat down. He thought for a few seconds, then said something I didn't fully understand in that moment. Lena, I think you need to check all of your accounts. That night I opened my laptop, logged into my bank account, started going through the transaction history. 3 months, 6 months, a year. At first I thought it would be a couple small things, but the more I looked, the more I saw what wasn't right. 1,000, 3,000, 10,000, repeating transfers, always to the same place, my father's company. In total, over $70,000. I sat staring at the screen for a long time. Ethan stood behind me. Do you remember giving them this money? I shook my head. A cold feeling ran down my spine. That was the moment I started to understand something. My parents weren't just trashing Ethan. They weren't just trying to stop me from getting married. They had done something much worse. They had been taking money from me for years, and I hadn't even realized it. But what truly shocked me was what I found a few minutes later. A new transaction. A big amount. Transferred out of my account. Just 2 days earlier. And the recipient wasn't my father. It was Ryan Harper, my brother. I stared at the screen. Ethan read the transaction line, then asked a question. Did you tell them you finally saved enough money for the wedding? I nodded slowly. And in that moment, a terrifying thought formed in my head. Maybe none of this was coincidence. Maybe my family had a plan from the start. A plan I knew nothing about. And worse than that, it might be the reason they wanted to destroy my wedding. But I still didn't know one thing at that time. The money I had just found was only the smallest part of the story, because a few weeks later, I would discover another secret. A secret so big it would turn my wedding day into a nightmare in front of the whole town. I barely slept that night. The laptop screen stayed lit in front of me. The numbers in my bank history bright, cold, and brutally precise. Money doesn't lie. Money doesn't care about feelings, and it doesn't care about family. It only records what happened, and what I was looking at made my stomach tighten. I scrolled slowly. 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years. The more I looked, the more I understood something I had never allowed myself to think before. These transfers weren't mistakes. They had patterns. They had a plan. Every time I finished a big photography job, a few days later, money would move out. 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, 10,000, always to the same place. Harper Construction, my father's company. I leaned back in the chair. The room was so quiet I could hear the wall clock ticking. Ethan was still behind me. He put his hand on my shoulder. Are you okay? I shook my head. I think I just found something really bad. He pulled a chair and sat beside me. Show me. I turned the screen toward him. He stared at the transactions. 1 minute, 2 minutes. Then he let out a slow breath. Lena, this isn't one time. I know, this is dozens of times. I know. He pointed at one transfer. This one is 12,000. Yeah. He looked at me. Do you remember giving your dad this money? I shook my head. No. I clearly remembered the times I chose to help my family. I remembered when my mom called saying they needed money to fix the roof. I remembered when Ryan said the company was struggling. I helped, but I knew those amounts. What was on the screen, I had never seen. Ethan sat in silence for a few seconds, then asked, Does your dad have access to your account? I thought. And then memory started coming back. Yes. Since when? Since I opened my first account. I exhaled. My dad helped me open it when I was 18. He said it would be easier if he was on it too. Ethan nodded. A joint account. I nodded back. But later, I stopped thinking about it. Ethan looked at the screen again. That means technically he can withdraw money. I gave a dry laugh. Having the right doesn't mean you should do it. Ethan didn't argue, because we both knew that was true. I scrolled to the bottom. One transfer stood out again. $20,000, 2 days ago. Recipient, Ryan Harper. I stared at it. Ryan, my brother. Ethan read it and asked, What is your brother doing with your money? I didn't know. I picked up my phone and called Ryan. It rang 3 times. He answered. Hey, Lena. His voice sounded normal. I didn't greet him. You just received $20,000 from my account. Ryan went quiet for a beat. Then he said, Oh, just one word. No explanation. No apology, just... Are you going to say anything else? Ryan sighed. Dad needed money for a project. Then why did it go to you? Because I managed the company's finances. My face got hot. That's my money. Ryan gave a small laugh. Lena, you always overreact. I'm overreacting because you're pulling money from my account. Dad already talked to you. He said he needed it. Ryan kept going. Family helps each other. You know that. I closed my eyes. Family helps each other. I'd heard that my whole life, but no one in my family ever asked if I needed help. You're going to return it, Ryan said. When? After. After when? After the project is done. I took a deep breath. Ryan, yeah, if you don't return it, I'm going to lock the account. Silence on the line for a few seconds. Then Ryan said, You won't do that. Why not? Because you always put family first. That made me laugh, but it wasn't happy. It was the laugh of someone who just realized she'd been used for too long. I think you're wrong. Since when did you get selfish? Since I found out my family has been taking my money. I hung up. My hand shook slightly. Ethan looked at me. Are you okay? I didn't know. I leaned back and it felt like someone had pulled a curtain off my eyes. Things I used to think were normal suddenly looked different. The times my dad asked about my savings. The times Ryan asked how business was going. The times my mom said I should help the family more. I thought they cared. Now I started to think they were checking how much money I had left. Ethan stood up and went into the kitchen. A few minutes later, he came back with 2 cups of hot tea and set one in front of me. You don't have to solve everything tonight. I want to understand this. We will, he said, but one step at a time. I looked at the laptop again. The numbers were still there. They weren't going anywhere. What's the next step? Ethan thought for a few seconds. Tomorrow, we go to the bank, and we close the joint account. I nodded. It sounded simple, but deep down, I knew it wouldn't stop there. Because once you start seeing the truth about your family, you start seeing other things too, things you didn't want to believe before. And a few days later, I would find something even worse. Something that would finally explain why my parents wanted to destroy my wedding. Because if I got married, a secret they'd been hiding for years wouldn't be able to stay hidden anymore. The next morning I woke up very early. The sky outside the window was still gray. Willow Creek in the morning was quiet in that specific small-town way. The road in front of our apartment was almost empty, just one pickup truck passing by and disappearing around the corner. I stood in the kitchen making coffee. My hands still shook a little, not from lack of sleep, but from the feeling that everything in my life had shifted slightly, like the floor moved a few millimeters. Not enough to be obvious, but enough to make you feel unsteady. Ethan came out of the bedroom wearing a gray t-shirt and jeans, hair a little messy from sleep. You're up early. I couldn't sleep. He looked at me for a few seconds, then nodded like it made perfect sense. We ate breakfast almost in silence. Not uncomfortable silence, just the silence of 2 people thinking a lot. After about 10 minutes, Ethan said, We're still going to the bank, right? I nodded. Yeah. Are you sure? I want the truth. He looked at me, then said quietly, The truth isn't always easy to hear. I took a sip of coffee. I think I'm used to that already. The bank was on the corner of the town square. An old red brick building with an American flag outside and a metal sign faded by time. I had walked in there hundreds of times, but that day felt completely different. The teller was a woman named Margaret. She'd known me since high school. Hi, Lena, she smiled. Haven't seen you in a while. I tried to smile back. I need to talk about my account. Margaret looked at her computer. Of course. Ethan stood beside me with his arms crossed. Margaret started scrolling through the transactions. The numbers appeared exactly like what I'd seen the night before, but seeing them inside the bank's system made them feel more real. Real enough to hurt. Margaret frowned slightly. You didn't know about these transactions. No. She looked at me. Your father made most of them. Ethan asked. How many times? Margaret checked. About 37 times. My throat went dry. Over how long? 2 years. 2 years. For a few seconds, it felt like I couldn't hear anything. 2 years. For 2 years I had worked almost every day, shooting, editing, driving to towns around Willow Creek, saving every dollar. And the whole time, my father had been regularly taking money out of my account. Margaret looked at me with a sympathetic expression. He gave a small nod. I turned back to Margaret. Yes. I want to move everything that's left into my personal account, Margaret typed. Your father will be notified. I exhaled. That's fine. And I knew very well it wasn't fine at all. Because in a town like Willow Creek, news traveled faster than any car. My father would know before we even got home. And sure enough, the moment we stepped out of the bank, my phone buzzed. Dad. Ethan looked at me. Up to you, I answered. What did you just do? No greeting, no concern, just a cold question. I closed the joint account. Silence for a few seconds. Then, What do you think you're doing? I'm protecting my money. His voice hardened. Family doesn't keep score. I looked across the town square. A few people were walking by. Their lives were normal, only mine was breaking apart piece by piece. You took over $70,000 from me. I raised you for 20 years. So you have the right to take my money. My father exhaled hard. You've changed. I'm just finally seeing things clearly. He scoffed. That's because of that programmer. Ethan stood beside me and heard every word. I said, "Don't bring Ethan into this. He's turning you against your family." "No," I said slowly. "You're doing that." My father went quiet, then said something I would remember for a long time. "If you keep going down this road, you won't have a family anymore." I looked at the sky above the square. "Dad." "Yeah. Since when does family mean you can take my money without asking?" He didn't answer. He just said, "You'll regret this," and hung up. We stood there in the middle of the square for a few minutes. Ethan put his hand on my shoulder. "Are you okay?" I nodded, but I wasn't sure. "Do you think they'll stop?" Ethan thought, then said honestly, "I don't think so." I looked at him. "Then what are they going to do?" He shrugged. "I don't know. But when people lose control, they usually react hard." I breathed out slowly. In that moment, I thought the fight had started. But I still didn't know it was going to get so much worse. Because 3 days later, I would get a phone call. A phone call that made me realize my parents weren't just talking about Ethan. They were doing something even more dangerous. They were trying to destroy his reputation in front of the whole town. 3 days after the bank situation, I realized something. Rumors in a small town don't just appear, they always start with someone. And usually the person who starts them is the one who benefits most from people believing the story. I realized that on a Wednesday afternoon, I was editing photos in my small studio behind an old bookstore. The room was small, just enough for a desk, camera stands, and an old couch where clients sat to review photos. I was selecting images for a couple who had just gotten married the week before when the door opened. A woman walked in. Linda Carter, the bride's mother. I'd known her for years because I'd photographed their family a few times. "Hi, Lena." I turned my chair. "Hi, Miss Linda." But I immediately sensed something was wrong. She wasn't excited, and she usually was. "Are you here to pick up the photos?" She shook her head. "No." She stood still for a few seconds, then said, "I think I should tell you something." My heart tightened. "What is it?" Linda sighed. "Your parents are telling people Ethan is in a lot of debt." I stared at her. "Yes, that the company he works for is about to go under." My head felt light. "Where did you hear that?" "At church." I almost laughed. In Willow Creek, church wasn't just where people prayed. It was where rumors spread the fastest. "And there's more," Linda said. "Your father says Ethan is using you to get access to Harper family money." I went quiet. A cold line ran down my spine. Not because I believed it, but because I knew what my father was doing. He was preparing the ground, building a story people would accept. A story where Ethan was the villain and I was the naive daughter being fooled. Linda looked at me. "I don't believe it, but I think you should know." I nodded. "Thank you." She stayed a moment longer, then spoke softly. "Lena, are you sure you're okay?" I smiled slightly. "I think so." But after she left, I sat still for a long time. The room went quiet, just the computer fan and traffic outside. I opened my phone, searched my father's name on social media, and started reading the comments under his recent posts. At first, nothing. Then deeper down, I started seeing familiar lines. "I heard your daughter is dating someone questionable. You should be careful. These days there are so many scammers." I realized something. My father wasn't directly attacking Ethan. He was planting doubt and letting the town do the rest. I put my phone down. A heavy tiredness washed over me. Then Ethan called. "Did you eat yet?" "No. I'm on my way home. Want me to grab pizza?" I smiled. "Sure." That night I told Ethan about Linda. He didn't look surprised. I figured that was coming. "Why are you so calm?" Ethan shrugged. "I work in tech. The internet taught me one thing. Rumors don't need truth." I looked at him. "You're not bothered." He thought for a moment. I am, but I'm not scared. Why not? He looked at me and smiled slightly. Because I don't have anything to hide. I wished I could be as calm as he was. But I knew my parents. And I knew something else. When they decide to destroy something, they don't stop halfway. A week later, it got worse. I was photographing a family in the park when I got a text. It was from Sarah, my best friend since high school. The message said only one thing: you need to see this. Under it was a link. I opened it. It was a post in a town Facebook group. The headline read, "Warning. A strange man is taking advantage of women in Willow Creek." The post didn't name Ethan, but the description was obvious. A programmer working remotely, no family in town, engaged to the daughter of a local businessman. My heart started pounding. Dozens of comments underneath. Some people said they heard he had financial issues. Some said they heard he'd been sued. No one had proof, but it didn't matter. Rumors don't need proof. I scrolled to the bottom. The post came from an anonymous account. But as I read closely, the writing style, the phrases, one line made me stop. The Harper family is very concerned for their daughter. I knew exactly who wrote that line, because that's how my mother always spoke. The Harper family. The Harper family, like a brand, a name. I locked my phone and stared at the grass. The child I was photographing ran around with a red ball, laughing, everything normal. But in my head, a thought sharpened. My parents didn't just want me to break up with Ethan. They were trying to make the whole town believe Ethan was the bad guy. And if the town believed that, then when my wedding collapsed, no one would ask why. But what my parents didn't know was that the same day, Ethan found something too. A document. An email. Something that could explain why my father was so desperate. And when Ethan showed it to me, I finally understood. My family wasn't just afraid of losing control. They were afraid of a secret getting exposed. That night it rained. In Willow Creek, rain came without warning. The day could be lightly sunny, then at night clouds rolled in from the Tennessee River and dumped water on the town like someone turned on a giant faucet in the sky. I sat in the living room with my laptop open, but I wasn't really working. I was trying to edit photos for a client, but my mind kept replaying the Facebook post, the comments, the suspicion. People who had never met Ethan, still convinced he was dangerous. I shut the screen. The apartment felt darker. Right then, the door opened. Ethan walked in, jacket still wet. "You're home," I nodded. "Did you eat?" "Not yet." He set his bag down and looked at me. Just one look, and he knew something was wrong. "The rumors got worse, didn't they?" I nodded. "A little worse." He let out a small breath. I figured. He went into the kitchen, grabbed 2 glasses of water, and sat next to me. We were quiet for a few seconds. Then Ethan said, "I think I know why." I looked at him. "Why what?" "Why your parents are doing this?" I frowned. He said it like he'd solved a problem. Ethan gave a slight smile. "Maybe I did." He opened his laptop. An email was on the screen. "I found this today." "Where?" "In the state business registry system." I leaned toward the screen. A company name sat in the middle. Harper Construction LLC. My father's company. "Why were you looking that up?" I was curious. Ethan scrolled to a PDF. A financial report. I stared at the numbers, not fully understanding yet. "What are you seeing?" Ethan pointed at one line. "Debt." I read the number, then had to read it again. $1,420,000. I looked up. "That's the company's debt." "Yes. My father never said anything about that." Ethan nodded. "That's the point." He scrolled again. And here's the interesting part. A list of loans appeared. Banks, investment funds, contractors. I stared at those numbers, and for the first time, I started to understand. My father didn't just need money. He was desperate. "You think the transfers from my account were used to keep the company alive?" I sat still as the pieces started fitting together. The transfers, the rumors, the opposition to Ethan. I said slowly, "My father is terrified of losing the company." "Right. But what does that have to do with Ethan?" Ethan didn't answer immediately. He opened another file. A contract. I read the title line. Personal Guarantee Agreement. What is that? A personal guarantee for a loan. Ethan pointed at the name at the bottom. I looked, and my heart thumped. Ryan Harper. My brother, Ethan said. Ryan signed a personal guarantee for this loan. I looked at the amount. $750,000. What does that mean? If the company collapses, Ryan is responsible for that debt. And I understood instantly. Ryan didn't have that kind of money. No one in my family did. Except me. A cold wave moved through my body. You think? Ethan nodded. They're preparing. Preparing for what? If the company goes under, your money becomes the backup plan. I laughed, but it sounded hollow. So they steal my money and destroy my wedding just to protect the company. Ethan looked at me. Not just that. He opened another email. Just a few lines. Sender, Richard Harper. Recipient, Ryan Harper. Date, 2 weeks earlier. I read it. If Lena gets married, we'll lose access to her account. We need to handle this before the wedding. I read it again. The words were short, but the meaning was brutal. I pressed a hand to my forehead. So, Ethan nodded. They're not just against me, they're trying to stop you from getting married. I stared out the window, replaying everything from the past months. The rumors, the calls, the warnings. It all had purpose, I said quietly. My father is trying to keep me close, so he can keep taking money. Ethan didn't deny it. I turned to him. Aren't you scared? I'm a programmer. I'm used to messy systems. I shook my head. My family is messier than any system. He laughed softly. Maybe. Ethan pointed at the screen. We have proof. I stared at the email, the contract, and the numbers. A thought slowly formed. What are you going to do with it? Ethan shrugged. Right now, nothing. Why? Because sometimes timing matters more than truth. I looked at him. You're thinking of something. He smiled a little. I knew that look, the look he got when he was solving something complicated. I asked, Are you going to tell everyone? He shook his head. Not yet. Then when? Ethan looked at me and said something that surprised me. Maybe at the wedding. Are you kidding? No. I think the truth should be said in front of everyone. I pictured it. My father, Ryan, my mother, 150 guests. The truth. I didn't know whether to feel terrified or relieved, but I still didn't know that my parents were preparing too. And they would strike first. On my wedding day, in front of the entire town of Willow Creek. After the night Ethan showed me those documents, I barely slept. Not because I was angry. That feeling had passed. Instead, there was something else. A strange silence in my head. Like when you stand in a room where every familiar object has been moved slightly. Everything looks the same, but you know something has shifted. I stared at the ceiling for almost 2 hours. Details from the past months connected themselves. My mother's sudden calls, the questions about my account, my father asking how much I had saved, Ryan joking that I didn't know how to spend money. Before, I thought they were normal. Now I knew they were calculating. The next morning, I called my mother. She answered after 3 rings. Lena. Her voice was calm, like nothing had happened. Do you have time to talk? What's going on? I sat at the kitchen table. I want to ask about Dad's company. A pause. Not long, but long enough for me to know she didn't expect it. What about the company? The company is struggling, isn't it? My mother gave a small laugh, quick and thin. You've been listening to nonsense again. I stared out the window. I saw the financial report. Silence. Longer this time. Then she said, You don't understand those things. I understand one number. What number? $1,400,000. On the other end, she didn't speak. I could picture her looking around a living room like someone might overhear. Finally, she said, You shouldn't dig into adult matters. I almost laughed. I'm 30. You're still our child. That sentence turned my stomach cold. Not because she raised her voice, but because she said it so calmly. I asked, Dad took money from my account. I know. So you knew too. That's family business. I closed my eyes. Family doesn't take money without saying anything. My mother exhaled. Your father was only borrowing. Borrowing for 2 years. The company needed money. I went quiet, then asked the most important question. Then why did you tell the whole town Ethan was scamming me? This time she didn't deny it. She didn't laugh. She didn't explain. She just said, "We have to protect you. By ruining his reputation, by stopping you from making a mistake. Marrying Ethan isn't a mistake. You don't know that. I do." Then she said slowly, "Lena, you don't understand the situation." What situation? This family is on the edge. I knew she meant the company, but I wanted to hear her say it. Your father could lose everything. I'm not the solution to that. You're part of this family. That sounded like a rope. The rope they'd always used to pull me back. I asked, "Does Ryan know all this?" "Ryan is trying to help your father by signing a personal guarantee for a $750,000 loan." Total silence. I could hear the clock in my apartment. Tick, tock, tick, tock. Finally, my mother said, "Who have you been talking to?" "No one." "Then how do you know that?" I didn't answer. After a few seconds, she said something that made everything clear. "You shouldn't let that Ethan get involved in family matters. That Ethan." I remember exactly how she said it. "Not Ethan. Not your future son-in-law. That Ethan." I asked, "So what's your plan?" "There is no plan. Only a family trying to keep everything from collapsing. By taking my money. By keeping me close." That phrase chilled me. "Keeping you close. You've always been the most understanding one." I laughed, not happily. Understanding, or easy to use. She didn't answer that. Instead, she said, "The wedding is still 6 months away. You can still think again. I'm not canceling my wedding. You're only saying that right now. I'm saying it because it's my decision." Then she said slowly, "I hope you know what you're doing." "I do." "Then you should prepare." "Prepare for what?" She paused for a second, then said the sentence I would never forget. "Prepare for everyone to know the truth." I frowned. What truth? But she hung up. I sat with the phone in my hand, her words looping in my head. Prepare for everyone to know the truth. And I still didn't understand then. I didn't know what my parents were preparing. I didn't know that 6 months later, on my wedding day, they would stand in front of 150 guests and announce that I was no longer their daughter. 6 months passed faster than I expected. After that call, I stopped trying to convince them. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I just kept planning the wedding. But during those 6 months, Ethan and I did one more thing. We saved everything. Every email, every text, every rumor, every social media post, not for revenge, but to make sure that if things ever went too far, we would have the truth in our hands. During that time, I only saw my parents twice. Both times were brief. My father never asked about Ethan. Never asked about the wedding plans. He only asked one question. "Have you changed your mind?" I always answered the same. "No." Ryan changed too. He stopped talking to me the way he used to. His texts became a few short lines, sometimes weeks of silence. My whole family felt like they were standing on the other side of an invisible wall. But the strangest part was, they still said they would attend the wedding. My mother sent it in a short text. "The family will still be there. It's the right thing to do." I felt something was off. I just couldn't imagine what was waiting. The venue was a large garden at the edge of Willow Creek. A stone path led in. Maple trees were turning yellow and red. 150 guests. Friends. Relatives. A few townspeople whose weddings I had photographed. Soft music. Wine glasses. White tablecloths. Everything looked almost perfect. I stood behind the garden's wooden doors with the officiant. Ethan stood at the front with his best man. I could see him through a narrow crack. He looked calm, like always. Before the doors opened, Ethan turned and looked back toward me. We shared a quick glance, but it was enough to make me feel like everything would be okay. The music started. The doors opened, and I stepped out. 150 heads turned. That's the moment most brides dream about. The moment you walk toward the person you'll spend your life with. I walked slowly, my steps soft on the stone. Ethan smiled as I got closer. I thought it would unfold like the weddings I had photographed for dozens of other couples. Until the gate behind the garden opened. I turned, and I saw them. My father. My mother. Ryan. All three entered at the same time. The first thing I noticed was the color. Not because they were dressed fancy, but because they were dressed entirely in black. Black suit, black dress, black tie. Like they were attending a funeral. Guests began whispering. A woman at a table near the aisle leaned to her friend. "What is this?" My father didn't look at anyone. He walked straight forward. My mother beside him, Ryan behind. I looked at Ethan. He saw them too, but he didn't speak. My father stopped in the middle of the garden, right in front of the first row. The officiant looked confused. "We can begin the ceremony." But my mother stepped forward, fast and decisive. She walked straight to the DJ table, and before anyone could react, she yanked the microphone out of his hand. The speakers screeched. The entire garden went silent. 150 people looked at her. I stood frozen on the aisle. My heart started pounding. My mother looked out at everyone, then locked eyes with me. No hesitation, and she announced loudly, "I'm sorry to do this today." Guests looked at each other. She continued, "But our family cannot stay silent anymore." I heard Ethan say quietly from the front, "Lena." But I couldn't take my eyes off my mother. She held the microphone with both hands, then said the sentence I replayed in my head hundreds of times after that. "Our family came here today," she paused for one beat, "to mourn the daughter we lost." A few guests gasped. A man at a nearby table whispered, "What?" I stood there numb. The whole garden was silent. My mother kept going. "Our daughter has been deceived, manipulated, used by a man." She turned toward Ethan. "And we cannot stand by and watch our girl ruin her life." The whispering spread through the garden. 150 people, all staring at me, at Ethan, at my parents. My mother lifted the microphone closer. "We came here today to tell the truth." My hands started shaking. I wanted to speak, to step forward. But before I could open my mouth, Ethan moved. He stepped down from the wooden platform where he had been standing. Slowly, calmly, he walked toward my mother. 150 people held their breath. Ethan stopped in front of her, then said something so soft that later, many people in Willow Creek would still repeat it. He said, "You're right." The garden fell even quieter. Ethan looked across the 150 guests, then said, "It's time everyone hears the truth." And that was the moment everything began to change. The whole garden felt like it stopped breathing. No one spoke. Ethan stood facing my mother, calm enough that it pulled everyone's attention even harder. He didn't snatch the microphone. He didn't argue. He only turned to the sound technician near the stage and said something quietly. "Can you turn the screen on for me?" At the back of the garden, there was a large screen meant to show wedding photos. The sound technician looked around, clearly unsure what to do, but in the end he turned it on. A white glow lit up behind Ethan. Ethan looked at my mother again. "You're right about one thing," he said, still calm. "It's time everyone knows the truth." Guests sat up straighter. I looked at the front rows. Some people were holding their phones. Some were whispering. My father stood a few steps away with his arms folded, face tightening. Ryan behind him, glaring at Ethan. Ethan continued. "For months, there have been rumors about me. That I'm scamming Lena. That I don't have a real job. That I'm trying to take her money." Some guests nodded slightly, like they had already heard it all. Those stories didn't appear by accident. He turned slightly toward my parents. They started in a very specific place. My mother tightened her grip on the microphone. "Enough," she snapped. "This is my daughter's wedding." Ethan nodded. "Exactly." Then he added a line that made many guests turn toward my parents. "And that's exactly why I'm talking about it here." He stepped aside. On the screen, a document appeared. A table of numbers. People in the first row leaned forward. Ethan said, "This is the financial report for Harper Construction." Whispering rose. My father's company was well known. Many people there had worked with him. Ethan pointed at a number. "The company's current debt is over $1.4 million. The air in the garden shifted immediately. People looked at my father. My father stayed still, but his face tightened. Ethan continued. Over the last 2 years, part of that debt has been covered by money transferred from a personal account. He paused. Lena's account. A woman at a table to the right let out a small sound. Ryan stepped forward. What the hell are you talking about? Ethan didn't even look at him. He clicked to the next page. An email appeared. I recognized it. The same email Ethan showed me months earlier. Ethan read slowly. If Lena gets married, we will lose access to her account. We need to handle this before the wedding. The garden went completely silent. 150 people, not a word. My father stepped forward. You have no right. But Ethan kept speaking. This email was sent from Richard Harper to Ryan Harper. Ryan went pale. Guests began whispering again. My mother tried to interrupt. This is family business. But Ethan only said gently, yes. Then he looked at the 150 guests. And Lena's family said they came here today to tell the truth. He paused. So I think everyone deserves the whole story. I stood on the aisle, heart racing. But for the first time in months, I didn't feel panicked. I felt one clear thing. The truth was finally being spoken out loud. Ethan stepped closer to me. He put his hand over mine, then faced the guests again. Lena isn't the one being scammed, he said. She's just the only person in this family who didn't know what was happening. Some guests nodded. Others looked at my father with eyes that had changed completely. My father didn't speak anymore. He just stood there, looking around at the garden, at people who used to trust him. And in that moment, I realized what my father had been afraid of this whole time wasn't losing the company. It was losing his reputation in front of the town. Ethan squeezed my hand, then said quietly, We're not done yet. I looked at him. What do you mean? He smiled. This is just the beginning. The whole garden heard it. The air felt stretched tight. My father stood in the aisle, face turning red, looking around like he was searching for a way to take control again. Turn that screen off, he barked at the sound technician. But no one moved. Everyone was waiting. Ryan stepped forward, clearly losing it. You're ruining this wedding, he shouted. You think throwing up paperwork is enough. Ethan didn't move and said, Ryan, that signature is yours. Ryan opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Then a chair in the second row scraped the grass. People turned. It was Mark Sullivan. He stood slowly, hands braced on the chair in front of him. Mark had done business with my father for almost 20 years. In Willow Creek, his words carried weight. He stared at the screen for a long moment, then looked at my father. Richard, he said, low but clear, you should tell everyone what's going on. My father didn't answer. Mark sighed. I've heard things in town for months, but I didn't think it was this serious. He looked at me. This girl grew up here. We all know her. Then he looked back at my father. If her money was used to save your company, you should tell the truth. The garden stayed silent. My father looked at Mark, then at the people around him. Old partners, old clients, old neighbors, people who once trusted him. Finally, my father spoke. It was just a temporary loan. His voice was much smaller now. Ethan didn't jump in, but another man at a nearby table spoke up. Richard, isn't the bank closing in on you? It was Tom Briggs, a contractor who had worked with Harper Construction. My father didn't answer. Ryan was almost shouting now. We don't have to stand here and explain ourselves to the whole town. But no one was listening to him anymore. People already understood. No more proof was needed. My father's reaction said everything. My mother moved in and grabbed my father's arm. We're leaving. My father hesitated, then turned away. Ryan followed, face still flushed. The three of them walked out of the garden under everyone's eyes. The wooden gate closed behind them. No one stopped them. No one called after them. A long silence passed. Then Mark Sullivan turned toward me and gave a small nod. You did the right thing. Just 4 words, but my throat tightened. Ethan held my hand. Are you okay? I nodded. Then I looked toward the officiant. He was still standing near the stage, looking like he had never seen a wedding like this in his life. I smiled. Can we continue? A few guests chuckled, then someone clapped, then others clapped too. Not for drama, But because everyone understood the wedding shouldn't end like that, the ceremony continued. Not perfect, surely. When Ethan said his vows, he looked straight at me. He didn't promise life would always be easy, he said, but he promised he would always stand beside me. I held his hand, and for the first time in years, I felt completely steady. News of the wedding spread across Willow Creek within days. In a small town, everything travels fast. First in coffee shops, then in the grocery store, then even at Sunday church. People learned about my father's company debt, learned about the money taken from my account, learned about the personal guarantee Ryan signed. A few months later, Harper Construction lost most of its big contracts. The bank demanded repayment. By late fall, the company officially filed for bankruptcy. Ryan had to sell the new house he'd bought to cover part of the debt. My parents left Willow Creek not long after. No goodbye, no calls, just gone. Ethan and I left the following spring. Not because we were ashamed, but because I understood that sometimes, to start over, you need a new place. We moved to Knoxville, a bigger city where no one knew what happened at that wedding. I kept photographing. Ethan kept working remotely like before. One morning, as I made coffee in our new kitchen, Ethan asked, "Do you ever miss Willow Creek?" I thought for a few seconds, then shook my head. No, I don't miss the rumors. I don't miss the fights. The only thing I carried from that town was a simple lesson. Sometimes the truth shatters everything, but after everything breaks, that's when you finally get to begin again. If you made it this far and something in this story feels familiar, maybe you understand what it's like when family becomes the place that hurts you the most. If you want to stay with me through the rest of this story, you can like the video or subscribe so you don't miss the next parts. And if you want, leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is where you are right now. I always read those messages, because sometimes just knowing someone is listening and understands is a bigger comfort than people realize.